the most common and popular tokenomics structure in Bittensor is the buyback and burn method, in which the subnet takes revenues, buys their token back, and burns it, lowering the amount of circulation and therefore increasing the scarcity. And I'm here to tell you that might not be the best idea. My name is Jeremy, aka School of Crypto, and I'm bringing you another Bittensor video. So I just saw a tweet by someone by the name of Ansem on X. He's a famous trader on the platform, does a lot of Solana stuff, not really into Bittensor, but he had a tweet that I thought was really interesting. He talked about how Pump Fun, which is a kind of like a meme launch pad that had some hype, about a year plus ago, and a bunch of memes flooded the market, and there were thousands and thousands and thousands of meme coins, some that did well, a lot that didn't, and it's just a very popular platform. And what made Pump Fun very interesting was the buyback and burn methodology that they implemented into their protocol. And they ended up buying back and burning $421 plus million worth of Pump Fun tokens, okay? And that was about a third of their entire supply, believe it or not. And right now, to this day, they are 76% down from their all-time high. And you can say, hey, Jeremy, it's a bear market. Everybody's down that much. Yes, you're right. But what does the buyback and burn really do? I understand that if you buy it back, you're increasing the volume. You burn it, you increase the scarcity. I get it. But that's just part of the equation. What about actually developing the product? What about actually building on your service? And this was something that Rob Greer, who's a partner with Stillcore Capital, brought up in a podcast I think I saw about a year plus ago. And he made a really good point. He said that, I think he was talking about buyback and burn, and he felt like that might not be the best idea. What about taking some of these revenues, some of these emissions, and actually putting it into your project, actually enhancing your digital commodity, using it for marketing dollars, spreading the word, developing more on the technology front in order to better go to market. I don't see that anywhere. All I see is, we're going to buy the token back, we're going to burn it, we're going to make all the community members happy, and because we're going to increase this volume and not have to rely on, other people buying this token, and offsetting the miner emissions, which I totally get. If a lot of miners are earning these tokens, and a lot of them sell, you have to do something to counterbalance that, which I get. But for me, any crypto project that's done really well, they've made their investors rich. Bitcoin, right? They developed a following because you had early investors, you had early adopters that, mined Bitcoin, bought Bitcoin, believed in the mission. It continued to go up based on the progress they made on the hash power and the adoption of that coin all around the world, right? Ethereum, same thing. People got into the ICO. They started having coins launch on Ethereum. The ICO mania on Ethereum. A lot of people got rich off of that, right? So it built a cult following in which they're shilling, for free, right? Did any of those, projects have any buybacks and burns? Did Solana have any buybacks and burns? Did Avalanche have any buybacks or burns? None of these like really top projects, XRP, right? The list goes on. They developed a project, a protocol, a product that ultimately, helped people get rich or build on top of it or utilize and to better their lives. That's what they did. And if these subnets are just focusing in on buying back their token and burning it, what about their development, right? What about taking funds and then putting it into their project and making it better? What about helping these community members thrive with them? Like where is that in the equation, right? So I think that, again, I'm all for increasing scarcity. I'm all for creating more volume for your investors. I totally get that. But again, like, you got to think of this like a business. A business needs to invest in themselves, right? They need to grow. They need to continue to step up their game and increase their capabilities and their capacity and scale and do a lot of things that help them grow. And if they're just focusing in on using their revenues just to buy the token back and burn it, that's taking away a lot from what they can possibly do to just like increase their use cases and increase their resources in terms of how they can expand their horizons and market their product outside the states or to other countries. And this is a really important aspect that I honestly think a lot of subnets should be looking into. And another thing is, I think it was Mark Jeffrey that I was watching, and I think somebody asked him, I think it might have been Millie, he was asking him, like, what is the one or two things that you really look for in a subnet before investing? And one of his answers was revenue, and again, revenue, it's great. It shows that, the market is valuing your product, your service, and there's a demand, right? And people want it and people are using it and people there's an application, right? That's great. But there's also the case where you have products or services or digital commodities or models or AI agents that are really just trying to get their footing and get their sea legs in terms of building out what they're trying to ultimately end up with. And that takes time, and a lot of times I feel like these products, it takes a while for it to come together and to click. And the lack of revenue could be a little bit, it could make your perspective a little fuzzy in terms of its potential success, right? And what it can do down the road. And current lack of revenue doesn't mean that it's going to equate to lack of revenue in the future. You could have a product that's developing really, really good technology. It hasn't gone to market. It hasn't been making a lot of revenue. But if and when it does build what they say they want to build and what their goals are, it can absolutely make a lot of revenues down the road. So, I think that it was something that I heard on a podcast, I believe, on Ventura Labs with my guy Grant, and he had the owner of Ninja on his podcast, and he made the exact same point. He was like, I'm not even focusing in on revenues, I'm not even thinking about that. All I'm trying to do is try to make my model, my agent, the best it can possibly be, and that has nothing to do with revenues, that has nothing to do with buying back and burning. That's literally just trying to figure out any way possible to make that agent the best it can be. And then and then just making it state of the art, right? Like, having it have capabilities, to do things that other agents can't. And then again, if and when it does what they want it to do, what they want to achieve, that can absolutely mean there can be a lot of revenues down the road. Once upon a time, I was a scout, and you had players that were struggling, that might have been young, that were in high school, that might have been multi-sport athletes, that may have not really played a lot of baseball, but had a lot of tools and had good makeup and had a good work ethic. And just because they were struggling then didn't mean that I was going to project them to struggle later, right? There have been a lot of cases where they've been very green, very ripe, but like a lot of potential, a lot of tools, and they ended up really flourishing. And it's the same thing for some of these subnets and some of these projects that don't necessarily have the revenues, or maybe aren't doing this buyback and burn. Those types of projects should not be underestimated, and that's where the fundamental analysis has to come into play. That's where looking into the team and looking into the group that's developing these incentive mechanisms and the type of activity of the miners and the progress that they're making. So I think that, again, I have nothing against buying the tokens back and burning. It's actually great. And I have nothing against revenues. Like, that's a great step in the right direction, and that's absolutely a positive. Like, there's no other way to put it. But I just think that there's so much emphasis on those two variables for subnets tokenomics, and then everything else gets like thrown into the wind, like developing the product and marketing the product, and even adding new team members, and doing things that you need to build your business, right? Like, if you're spending all your money just buying your token back and burning it, what do you have left to actually fund your business, fund your subnet, right? And then if you're an investor and you're just focusing on revenue, you might be missing out on some really amazing projects that are just, again, like in the infancy stages and not ready to go to market and get revenue. But again, like next month, next year, 6 months from now, they could get to the point where they are going to go to the market and they have a good enough product to be able to make those revenues down the road. So, for me, it's all about the future grade, right? It's the future grade. It's not the present grade. The present grade, they're just going to tell you, what they're doing right now and the developments that they're making. But it's what's going to happen in the future. It's not as much the present grade. If I want to go back to my scouting days, right? So again, I think like the theme of this video is, again, I'm not trying to downgrade, these types of tokenomics, and it definitely helps. But at the end of the day, these are businesses, right? Subnets are businesses. You need to grow. You need to flourish. You can't just focus on these types of this style of tokenomics that it's I don't think it's sustainable. I really don't think it's sustainable. And I just go back to that pump fun example, when you literally burned a third of their supply, and they bought back and burned $421 million worth of tokens, and they're still down 78% from their all-time high. So if that doesn't tell you something, I don't know what will. So I just wanted to throw this out there. I would love to hear some comments from you guys, and just like what your perspective is, and like what your opinion is on buyback and burn, on how you value revenues when you're investing into subnets. How much do you weigh that stuff? Like, do you look into more fundamentals? Do you look more into the team? Are you looking more into the future, or are you weighing the present more? Like, I would love to know. I think it's a combination of everything, and one shouldn't be weighed so much heavily over the other. So definitely let me know down in the comments what you think about this whole, popular Bittensor tokenomics structure of buying back and burning, and the valuation of revenues, and why you invest in subnets. or how you invest in subnets, I should say. So thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this content, like and subscribe. Thank you so much, and I will see you next time.